Welcome to the Probate Nation. My name is Richard Ruddy. I am the host of the show. Reverse mortgages have been around for many years. I recall first learning about them in the late 70s when I started practicing law. Over the years, we have been presented with issues in dealing with reverse mortgages, both for seniors while living and then in the administration of their estate. But this type of mortgage option has undergone significant changes in recent years in light of the growing senior population and their abiding wish to age in the home they know and love. In a recent show, we spent some time looking at reverse mortgages from two perspectives. First, the current requirements to qualify for a reverse mortgage, what funding options you have with a reverse mortgage, and what obligations you have to maintain a reverse mortgage. And second, how a reverse mortgage is handled and paid off when the owners of the home secured by the reverse mortgage die. The focus of our show this evening turns to how seniors are using reverse mortgages in their long-term care and retirement planning. And we are pleased to have as our guest a reverse mortgage expert who will explain some of the planning opportunities that seniors are using with a reverse mortgage. Our guest is a reverse mortgage specialist with Retirement Funding Solutions, a nationwide reverse mortgage direct lender. He has been in the mortgage industry for 25 years. Beginning in 2008, he has focused exclusively on reverse mortgages offered through the federally insured program called Home Equity Conversion Mortgage Loan Program. And in recent years, he has shared his reverse mortgage knowledge at continuing education programs for financial advisors, realtors, and attorneys. Please welcome reverse mortgage specialist Jim Warnes. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for driving up from Richmond to visit with us. That's not a short trip. You know, we have had a program previously that talked about reverse mortgage and went over some of those requirements, but just so we can refresh our viewers, can you just take a minute, first start with, what is the purpose behind a reverse mortgage?
The reverse mortgage really is intended to provide seniors with access to what would otherwise be an illiquid asset, that being the equity in their homes, without having the stress of a monthly mortgage payment against that. And then hopefully that will allow them to stay in their homes for as long as they choose, as long as they're able.
Okay, so it's a very noble purpose, and let's go over just briefly, what are the reverse, how does a reverse mortgage work as far as how do we get it, what do we get from it, how do we apply for it, and stuff like that?
Okay. The first requirement is that we are working with someone who is at least 62 years of age. At least one borrower must be 62.
Okay.
It must be a primary residence. The individual must have significant equity in the property, let's say from 40 to 60% equity, depending upon their age.
Okay.
They have to be able to demonstrate their willingness and capacity to meet their financial obligations. This is something relatively new in the reverse mortgage space just since April of 2015. Once they're in, then they've got a choice of how they take the funds. They can take it in a lump sum, they can take it in a line of credit, or they can take it in monthly payments over time.
So those choices as far as how they take the mortgage is really what we're going to focus on as far as how we can use for some of our planning opportunities that we talk about today. So I think that's, to focus our viewers, that's what we're really focusing on, those three different options and how they can be applied. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, who has authority to obtain a reverse mortgage? So it sort of seems obvious that the individual themselves can apply for the reverse mortgage, but let's talk about, a lot of people have people who are using durable financial powers of attorney. Can that person apply for a reverse mortgage?
They certainly can. It generally must be a durable power of attorney so that it survives the incapacity of the principal. But you can use a power of attorney for either a competent or an incompetent borrower. That power should include the authority to encumber the real estate owned by the principal. If you're dealing with a competent borrower, believe it or not, that borrower, even though the power of attorney is being used, must still complete the required mandatory counseling and sign the application form. The agent can then sign all the remaining forms and sign all the documents at closing. Okay, so
that's a good safeguard, though, in case someone's using a power. Now, I do know that you mentioned that there are some, in the underwriting process, there is some specific language that you mentioned that's got to be in that power of attorney, so we want to make sure we look for that early on if we're applying through a power of attorney to get a reverse mortgage. So.
We're fortunate, but it's rare that we are entered into the process at the time where the power is being drafted. Usually that document is already in existence.
Exactly.
With a power of attorney, generally if the language providing for the encumbrance of the property with a mortgage is in there, we should be okay.
Okay.
When we get to some of the other documents that you're going to discuss, then specific language becomes more important.
Well, let's turn to that. So a lot of people, they don't do a durable financial power. They end up having to have someone appointed to be their conservator. Okay, and so they go to court and they have a court order, which then empowers them to do a bunch of different things, both by statute and pursuant to the terms of that court order. So is there anything special we need to deal with in that court order in order to give that conservator the ability to apply for a reverse mortgage?
Yes, and there again, we're very fortunate if we're able to get into the process at the time that the order is being drafted. A court order for conservatorship for use with a reverse mortgage must contain language in the order specifying a reverse mortgage or a negatively amortizing loan. That language must be included in the order. What is interesting is that the order has to be signed by a judge, obviously, but you do not want to include an interest rate or a loan amount in the order. Now, the reason for that is both of those may change between the drafting of the order and the closing of the loan, and if there's any change in either rate or loan amount from that's specified in the order, then you've got to get a new order.
Well, we don't want to go in that circle.
Right. So just leave those two out.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So a lot of people, though, use as both a probate planning and estate planning tool a revocable trust to hold their assets, and they convey their house into the revocable trust. Anything special that needs to be in that trust agreement in order to allow the trustee to apply for a reverse mortgage?
Again, the language that the trustee has the power to encumber the property on behalf of the trust must be in there. The reverse mortgage language, if you have the opportunity to put it in, that's great, can't hurt, but often you don't. The borrower or the principal must be the primary beneficiary of the trust. They may or may not be the trustee. The trustee must receive the counseling, and the trustee will sign loan documents. If the borrower and trustee are one and the same, then those are both covered. But if those are two different people, you can have two different sets of people signing documents and receiving the counseling.
So in the case of the revocable trust, it might very well be that the person who actually is living in the house and the beneficiary of the trust might still be competent.
Yes.
But they don't need to go through the training program and that's like the trustee would have to go through.
No, they still will because
they
they are a borrower. They're the primary beneficiary,
Okay.
so they will receive counseling as will the trustee.
Just like in the power of attorney situation. Right. Okay, so I wanted to be clear about that. So we talked about who must receive the counseling. So let's turn to some of the strategies that you were kind enough to share with me that people are using reverse mortgages for. So tell me how a reverse mortgage can supplement the retirement income of a senior.
Well, we mentioned that there are three different ways that you can draw money, and any of those three can be used to supplement either a shortfall or the loss of some income for a senior. Most often it is done through a tenure payment, a monthly payment, which can be used to either replace or supplement income that's already coming into the house.
Now, we say tenure, you mean T-E-N-U-R-E, tenure payment. So
I'm glad you pointed that out because it's not 10 years, it's tenure as in length of time in the house. Lifetime in the house is considered a tenure payment.
Okay, so that's what and that is then something that's defined based upon their age as far as the calculation of that.
Right.
Okay. I guess the other benefit, of course, with the reverse mortgage, which is one of the key components, is that once you if you have an existing mortgage and you refinance it into a reverse mortgage, then you are eliminating a mortgage payment. Is that true?
Right. And the elimination of a payment is the same as addition to income. So if someone has a $1,000 a month mortgage payment and they can change that to a reverse, the payment now becomes optional. And either the payment can go away entirely, which moves that $1,000 over onto the other side of the ledger that they can use for other things, or they may just elect to reduce the payment because payments against the reverse are also allowed. So maybe $500 a month is comfortable, $1,000 was not. They can reduce the payment to $500 or whatever figure they feel comfortable with.
Okay, so that's a great tool for them. So let's talk a little bit about replacing the lost income. Let's say typically a spouse, husband and wife, have Social Security and annuity payments and pension payments. Frequently those are set up so that they're lower while they're both alive, so that when the first spouse passes away that the payment will still continue at some lower level for the surviving spouse, but we still have a reduction in income for that surviving spouse. So again, let's talk a little bit about how reverse mortgage helps with those those reduced pension payments?
Again, it works best when it is placed early, and I've had a number of clients who will do a reverse mortgage with no intention of using it, but in the event that one or the other of the spouses dies and we do have that income reduction, at some later point in time, they can convert all or a portion of the funds available through the reverse into a monthly payment and only take what they need. There's no requirement that they convert all or nothing. They can convert what they need, and they can change that conversion during the course of the term as well.
Okay, well that provides a great deal of flexibility.
Absolutely.
So we talked about cash flow, how we do increase cash flow through the elimination of the mortgage payment. So that's another important tool as well. Let's turn to the long-term care insurance strategies. You know, some people have bought long-term care insurance. Over time, those premiums go up, which we've seen, just because everybody's figured out that the original math was done incorrectly. And of course, once you make a claim on the long-term care policy, the premium cost typically ends, and that's helpful. But until there's a claim made, the policy premium has to be paid. So how can a reverse mortgage be used to retain an existing long-term care policy?
I've seen cases, Richard, and it's almost heartbreaking that people who have been paying into a long-term care policy for years, and they may have put tens of thousands of dollars into these premiums, and they reach a point where, particularly since the premiums are now rising, they determine we can no longer support these, we're going to have to give up the policy, right when they're on the threshold, potentially, of needing to file a claim.
Right.
With the reverse mortgage, they can tap the equity in their homes to continue making those premium payments and therefore leverage what may be a couple $1,000s in premiums against several $100,000 in benefits that they would otherwise forego.
That's a good idea. Now, also, even if you're making the premium payments and don't have the need to take that particular strategy, even when you make your claim on the long-term care policy, typically there's a 90 or 120 day wait period before you actually can begin to draw on the benefits. Okay, so how can a reverse mortgage help deal with those 90 or 120 days of maybe nursing home care or whatever that you might have to pay for?
Again, it provides a bridge during that time, and again, it is best if the reverse is already in place, because the time it takes to process and close the reverse could consume at least half of that 90-day elimination period. It may also be used to reduce the premiums on a long-term care policy by taking a longer elimination period than might otherwise be the case, because the individual has the reverse funds to fall back on.
So that's a strategy to consider when you're actually applying for long-term care insurance. Maybe place a reverse mortgage in place for that purpose as well. Now, some seniors, of course, apply for long-term care insurance and can't get it. They apply later in life, and they have some medical condition that just makes it not possible to have the policy issued to them. So, how can a reverse mortgage help them fund their long-term care cost outside of insurance policy?
I talk to a lot of long-term care agents about using a reverse mortgage as a proxy for a long-term care policy that their client can't get because they're uninsurable. There is no medical underwrite for a reverse, so they can position the funds. The funds actually grow over time, so it can provide a stash of cash, so to speak, that the borrower can use at any time for any purpose, but they can reserve it strictly for long-term care use. And there's no restriction on the use of the funds. It can be used for medicine, for caregiving, in-home, institutionalized, you name it.
So how they would do that would be to have basically typically a line of credit that's not used, that's available then for them to tap into when that time comes and they actually have to fund long-term care costs. Is that right?
Exactly. And there's never a requirement to tap that line of credit, but it's available. Better to have the choice.
Yes, I think that certainly is a good suggestion for folks that cannot be medically underwritten or otherwise can't bear the cost of when they try to buy a policy later in life. It would be very expensive. Well, let's take a look. Let's turn now to some home care and nursing home strategies that we could use where we can put a reverse mortgage to work as well. For those seniors who want to age in home, age at their house, some home modifications are typically necessary, on advice of professionals, because we want to make the home safe. How can a reverse mortgage help to pay for those modifications to the house?
Well, and as you're aware, those modifications could include everything from grab bars to widening doorways to putting in wheelchair ramps and so forth. It provides a source of funds to pay for those changes without having an associated debt service or payment requirements with that.
Okay, so that's a key thing about reverse mortgage is that when you draw on it, doesn't mean you have to pay it back until, in other words, you don't pick up a monthly payment by doing so. You basically
Right.
are using the money with the obligation to repay after you have passed away or you sell the house. Now, some seniors actually who are aging in place need assistance from caregivers in order to make their objective of living at home actually work. These caregivers, whether they're hired privately or through an agency, do cost money. So how does a reverse mortgage help to fund those types of costs?
I've done any number of these loans for folks where either one or in some cases both parties in a spousal couple need care in the home, and it can range from a couple hours a week to 24/7 all week long. So it provides, again, funding to provide that care, keep them in their home for as long as they can safely stay there.
And that generally would be the situation they would use a line of credit vehicle to draw on to deal with that.
That's usually the most effective means.
Okay. Many seniors eventually need to enter a nursing home or assisted living facility. They no longer can stay at home. And of course, the monthly costs for those facilities can be quite significant depending upon where that facility is located. If the senior has long-term care insurance, this may be a big help and could cover some or all of those costs. But if they don't have long-term care insurance, or the cost exceeds that, how can a reverse mortgage be a tool to help them meet that difference?
There's a couple different ways we can approach this, Richard. Occupancy of the home is a primary requirement to keep the reverse in place. If one of a couple is going into assisted living or dementia care and the other is remaining in the home, then the reverse, having been done in the past, can be used to fund the institutionalized spouse, or it can be placed at the time of institutionalization as long as the one spouse is remaining in the home.
Okay.
Another use of this, and I've done this in a couple of cases, has been to position the reverse early on in retirement in anticipation of my home equity is my ticket into retirement living. If and when the time comes, sometimes there's a time gap between how soon can I convert my house into cash to buy my way in. That might be anywhere from a month to 6 months. Having the reverse in place allows immediate access to the equity in the home, so you've got immediate access to the assisted living facility, and then you can put the home on the market and let it sell when it sells.
Okay, good. That's good strategy. Now we'll turn for a second and just talk about how reverse mortgages could be used in the context of qualifying for Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is a government program to provide long-term care for adults. It is a very complex area and certainly requires the skill of somebody who has the knowledge about all those requirements to qualify for Medicaid. But that being said, have you worked with attorneys who have incorporated and used reverse mortgages as part of a Medicaid qualification strategy for seniors?
I certainly have, and I would stress also that I am not a Medicaid attorney or a Medicaid expert. I helped implement the reverse mortgage in order to implement a strategy for this. But because the home is generally not a countable resource for someone who's seeking to qualify for Medicaid, and a line of credit secured by the home is not a countable resource. So in that context, it can be used and funds then drawn, because being drawn, they are borrowed. So it's not income. So it's not income for the purpose of Medicaid qualification either. The caveat in all this is that having the line of credit in place, making periodic draws, you have no issues with Medicaid, but what you don't want to do is to hold those funds over a month end or put them in the bank, so to speak. Your best strategy is to spend the funds in the same month in which they're drawn, so they not become countable as an asset for Medicaid qualification.
So I want to stress to our viewers that any discussion about Medicaid is going to have to be replete with qualifications, because it's very, very, very definition-driven and fact-specific. And so if you're going to, reverse mortgages is a tool that can be used in the appropriate situation, but you're going to need a Medicaid expert to help you sort through those rules and see whether it might be an appropriate tool to use in your situation. In the future, we hope to do some shows on Medicaid qualification, and we'll revisit this particular tool in the future. Let's talk about investment and tax strategies and see how those might help us here. Obviously, all investments should be discussed with your investment advisor, your financial advisor. I mean, we're not investment professionals, and we're not suggesting that reverse mortgage is an investment by any stretch of the imagination. But we sometimes need buffer assets to mitigate unusual circumstances that have not been anticipated. That's what they call the emergency funds that many people are supposed to try to obtain and keep. Many people, in retirement have an income stream from their retirement portfolio, but market conditions fluctuate, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to have to liquidate an asset that's gone down 10 or 15% just so you can keep that income stream up. Mm-hmm. So, can a reverse mortgage help smooth out some of these income fluctuations?
It absolutely can, and the phenomenon you just referred to is called sequence of returns risk, which is when you have negative returns early in retirement on an investment portfolio, and it can have tremendously negative effects on the life of that portfolio. By having the reverse mortgage in place, it becomes a non-correlated buffer asset, meaning it's not correlated to the stock market. Mm-hmm. So if the stock market goes down, you can turn to the reverse, draw your funds from the reverse, allow your portfolio time to recover, and avoid what's called negative dollar cost averaging as well by doing that.
Well, that would be a bad thing.
All the way around.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk about how reverse mortgages can be helpful, because obviously when we sell assets or take assets out of retirement accounts, those have income tax consequences. Mm-hmm. Okay, we receive a 1099-R, we got to put those on our personal 1040 tax return, we got to pay taxes on those. So what are the tax consequences of receiving money from a reverse mortgage?
Well, I'm also not a CPA or a tax guy, but that being said, in general terms, when you're tapping a qualified plan, taxes do have to be paid. And if we just dealt in round numbers, one might say, if I need $1 out of my qualified plan, I've got to pull out $1.50 in order to spend the 50 cents to pay my federal and my state taxes. Mm-hmm. If I need that same $1, I could reach into reverse mortgage funds and draw $1 because they are not taxable. So I can make my reverse funds go much further than a similar amount of qualified plan funds would go, mm-hmm. and avoid unnecessary withdrawals from the qualified plan beyond the RMD, the required minimum distribution that I have to take. And
that leads us to the last part of this discussion, which is even if you have a retirement plan, there are minimum required distributions you must take out. Mm-hmm. So if you have those fluctuations in income stream, because asset values go down, you really don't want to have to exceed the required minimum distribution because the assets in that retirement plan are growing tax-free. So can a reverse mortgage, again, be used to help smooth out those differences and avoid those exceeding your required minimum distribution requirements?
Yes, in that situation, then any need that you have above and beyond the required minimum distribution can be taken out of the reverse funds and allow your portfolio time to recover.
Well, let's just take, we have a couple minutes, just maybe a minute or two left here, real briefly, some miscellaneous strategies, kind of like a potpourri of mm-hmm. things. So what are some of the other strategies that folks are using reverse mortgages for?
Just to touch on a few, one is to set it up as a contingency fund for the unexpected. I have clients who have no intention of ever touching their home equity, but by positioning the reverse, they've given themselves the choice. If they get themselves in a tough spot, they've got the choice of whether or not they want to do that. So it's a contingency fund for the unexpected. It can also be used to purchase a home. Now that's another area and has only been available to us since 2009 when it was introduced. Mm-hmm. But it can be used to leverage purchasing power or used to conserve cash for other use.
Okay.
It can also be used, as I like to call it, a living legacy. If one intends to leave certain assets to their children, it can allow them to transfer those assets while they're still alive, and perhaps while the children have a greater need if they're buying their first home or putting their kids through school or that sort of thing. So that's an option that's available as well.
Okay. Well, we have covered a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. So I want to thank you for doing that. Let's take mm-hmm. this final, a few minute or so, and just if there's anything specific you want to really focus on and emphasize as a kind of a closing comment to how reverse mortgages can be used for the seniors.
Well, I've heard the expression, hope for the best and plan for the worst, and I think that applies very well in the reverse mortgage context. There are a lot of folks who really do not want and do not intend to tap their equity in their home, and they may think that by placing the reverse, they have to start borrowing the money, which they do not. They can position the asset, and then it's available and gives them the choice to use that later on, should they find themselves in circumstances where that is necessary. Coupled with that, I think one of the often missed benefits and strengths of the program is that with a reverse line of credit, having positioned it, the line of credit, access to credit, actually grows over time. So the unused and available balance is growing over time, meaning increased access to funds for the borrower. That growth is completely independent of the value of the real estate, believe it or not. The real estate can go up, down, or sideways. That line of credit is going to continue to grow. And again, it then becomes available later on should the need arise.
Well, that's a lot to digest. I want to thank you so much, Jim, for coming up to visit with us and for sharing all this great information with our viewers. It's a great public service to the community.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the opportunity.
Thank you again. More and more seniors have the following in common: a home they own with or without a mortgage, a wish to age in their home rather than go to an assisted living facility, and insufficient retirement income. What we learned this evening is that a reverse mortgage is an incredibly important tool that may be just what is needed to allow a senior to increase their retirement income and stay safely in their home a bit longer, or possibly for the balance of their life. We learned about a number of planning opportunities with this in mind, including a couple of strategies that merit emphasis. If you have a mortgage, a reverse mortgage can increase your cash flow by limiting that mortgage payment. If you want to stay in your home, it can help with some home improvements needed to make your home safe for you to stay. A reverse mortgage could serve to replace lost spousal income when a spouse dies. If you have long-term care insurance, it can help with the long-term care costs during that typical 90-day wait period before payments start on the policy. Using proceeds from a reverse mortgage can defer the need to exercise discretionary drawdown of income taxable assets such as retirement accounts or annuities. Clearly, reverse mortgages are an important tool available to seniors, their advisors, and especially their conservators and guardians of property. And with so many seniors seeking to age in place with dignity in the home they know and love, this may be just a tool to allow them to do so. This concludes our show this evening. We hope you found it informative. Replays of this show and all the shows to date, along with other helpful information, are available on the Probate Nation website. We encourage you to take advantage of this public service resource. On behalf of the Probate Nation, thank you for visiting with us.